Welcome to Salute Your Sports Week 8. Kamenechev, Drew Brackett, Tom Castleman. We have another exciting show this week. We're going to talk NFL, the whole COVID situation. We're going to break down some surprising teams like the Browns, the Bills, the Dolphins. Maybe not surprising, but teams that haven't won in ages. Who's most likely to go deep? We'll talk about the Bucks, college football playoff picture, NBA free agency, college hoops, and plenty more. We have some surprises for locks of the week, statement of the week, etc. Are you guys looking forward to this show?
Absolutely. At long last, we finally got the entirety of Week 12 done in the NFL, and a little bit of a delayed show because of some of those results, but gives us plenty to talk about.
Yeah, lots to talk about. Should be a good show today as I adjust my mic.
The mic adjustments by Drew Brackett.
Yes.
Yeah, we've been adjusting mics pre-show to make sure we have quality audio here on Salute Your Sports. Well, we'll get right to it. Tom, you mentioned it. Week 12 finally wrapped up. We had Wednesday night football. We had Tuesday night football earlier in the year. And actually, I'm sorry, more like Wednesday afternoon into the early night football.
Gotta light up that tree.
Or not Bengals, Ravens and Steelers played the game. Was it like 6 days after it was supposed to be played on Thanksgiving Thursday?
Right. It was supposed to be the Thursday night football game, the best game of the day, quite frankly, when you're talking about a couple teams out of the NFC East and then the Lions and the Texans. Two kind of games. We were all looking forward to that being the big one, and got pushed back due to a COVID-19 outbreak at the Ravens facility. I believe it was up to, was it like 18 or so? I could have that number a little bit off. Players and staff who tested
it was
positive
18,
over
and
the
they might have added a couple more at the last minute. At least 18.
That sounds about right. That's what got the game pushed back. Also, COVID-related in the NFL, the Denver Broncos were without a quarterback, so that kind of leads into this whole big picture question of how exactly the NFL has been handling this. Have they been doing a good job, a bad job? I certainly have some, I think, opinionated thoughts, although not being a health professional, I can't necessarily say that there's a whole lot of veracity behind them outside of stuff that I've kind of curated. But Drew, what were your thoughts on the games being pushed back, how the NFL handled everything?
Well, it's just a tough situation because obviously you have the positive tests and you have a guy like Lamar Jackson who tests positive, and he was out for the game, and you have to think, did that affect TV ratings? But as for the Broncos situation, man, you don't have a starting quarterback on your roster because everybody has it's being contact traced with COVID, and so you have to have a wide receiver play quarterback. You throw 9 times, completed 1 pass, 2 to the other team. I think he threw 2 picks. So really a rough day for the Broncos, and just a really odd Sunday afternoon game that probably not many folks watched because, quite frankly, most of the game it was a blowout.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that, since people who watch our show, listen to our show, may know this, but to kind of break down the Broncos situation a little bit. Jeff Driscoll, backup quarterback, test positive for COVID on Thursday, and they had video of a team meeting they submitted to the NFL. It was either Tuesday or Wednesday before the positive test. Drew Lock and the other quarterbacks, Drew Lock, former Mizzou Tiger, were not wearing masks in an enclosed area where they're all supposed to wear masks. And the NFL said, you guys cannot play because you're at risk for COVID. You're a close contact. Interesting enough, they got their test came back negative the day after the game. So I don't know and I know one of the Broncos players said that they felt that the NFL was trying to make an example of the Broncos. Did you guys think that was the case? Or, what kind of happened there? And by the way, real quickly, that receiver that they started was actually a receiver that was on their practice squad. Many people on the team didn't even know who he was. Journalists didn't know who he was. He last played quarterback in college.
Yeah, Wake Forest, great. Kendall Hinton, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great story for him. And, of course, I live in Winston-Salem, so Wake Forest is right here. And I remember watching him at Wake Forest, Kendall Hinton. So, everybody in this area knew who he was. So I guess the national writers did not know him, which is unfortunate.
Oh, well, Drew Brackett, you speak for a very small portion of America in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I certainly had never heard of him, and I'm a nerd and know a lot of the big names. I had never heard of this guy up until Saturday night when the news came out. They actually tried to have their one of their offensive coaches, who was a former college quarterback himself. They wanted him to be the quarterback. They petitioned the NFL. The NFL said no, so they went with the wide receiver, former quarterback turned wide receiver, turned back the quarterback. Personally, I don't know. The NFL says that to them it's all about containing an outbreak, and they say once an outbreak has been contained, they'll play the game. I don't know how much of that I believe. I think to an extent they were trying to set an example with the Broncos, and I think maybe they should have, because they had the video proof and the no masks. Honestly, though, I don't think the Broncos were going to beat the Saints anyways, but I kind of think the NFL did kind of set an example of Denver as far as how they're doing with this whole COVID situation. I think it's very complicated. I think there's a lot of opinionated people on it, but, they're doing what they can. I think it's an unprecedented situation. It's very hard for me to grade them or say they're doing great or doing bad. It's one of those things where I think they're a little bit panicked, but as you guys know, Tom, I'm sure will agree, while the NFL undoubtedly wants player safety, obviously everyone wants safety. To the NFL, the bottom line is getting the games in, and that's what matters most to them. And they're happy, and they keep saying we haven't canceled the game this year, and they haven't, but they've postponed quite a few, this one the most.
I'll let Tom talk real quick here, but I do have one question after he's done.
Sure.
Yeah, so in terms of, did the NFL make an example of the Broncos? I think that they did. Whether they intended to or not, that's a completely different question. But when you consider the amount of flexibility that they put into a prime matchup between two divisional rivals where there are heavy playoff implications, they made every concession possible. And it took NBC being like, hold up, we're going to light this here tree and you're going to play on Wednesday afternoon. What a flex by NBC to do that, by the way.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where the NFL has these really nebulous standards. Like, they have standards. It's nebulous whether or not they follow them, right? Because the Broncos self-reported, and I think it was about 30 or so hours between them reporting the video, and then the NFL got back to them on the Friday before the game telling them, you don't have any of your quarterbacks available. I don't understand why the NFL would take that much time to review a little bit of video and come to that conclusion. Give the Denver Broncos a little bit more time in the week leading up to the game to prepare. Push the game back to Monday. We've already had, one, maybe two Monday night double headers already. Just push the game back a little bit.
That's what they should have done. Because those quarterbacks, their tests came back negative on Monday morning. So.
You could have had a quarterback go that day, or even if the NFL hardlines it, at least you have one more day of practice for the practice squad wide receiver turned quarterback to get in. Yeah, it's definitely, as far as how they've been handling it for the whole season. I know that they have plans in place for a potential Week 18 if they need to postpone a couple of games. They'll expand the playoff field to 8 teams. They'll do away with the bye, but the reason why they really didn't want to do that for this Steelers-Ravens game is, what if you have something happen with, say, the Bills and the Steelers later down in the season? Which games do you prioritize for that Week 18? So, they're doing the best they can for the bottom line, which is, we can have our quarrels and quibbles about that. I think as far as how they handle the COVID stuff, so far it's been pretty okay. But coming back after a holiday and seeing how radial this can be, now it's starting to call into question the greater public health and the NFL's role in that.
Real quick, hypothetical, and Drew has a point too. I'll ask you hypothetically, say we had this Chiefs-Bucks game, which we'll bring up a little bit later in the show briefly. Say Chad Henne tests positive for the Chiefs. He's the backup quarterback. they get video of Patrick Mahomes without a mask near Chad Henne? Do they say, Patrick Mahomes, you're out against Tom Brady and the Bucks?
I mean,
I think
they
not.
should. They
But
should,
they won't.
but that's one
Well,
of those
they
things
should
that's
push
like,
it
oh,
back,
we got it
but-
lost in the shuffle or something like that. Like, yeah, they'll push it back, or they'll find some way to be like, oh, we didn't know about it until it was too late. Like,
Well, because they pushed the Ravens and Steelers back, they could have
Sure.
not pushed that one back. I think they were looking at the Broncos, and they're like, it's just the Denver Broncos.
It's
This is
a
the people that are
non-conference.
precedent.
Yeah, it's a non-conference. Doesn't really have that much implication on the playoffs. Like, I don't know. Drew, you said that you had a question that you needed to ask.
Oh, that was the question. I would have just phrased it a little differently. I mean, if this happened to Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers or Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, would the NFL have treated the situation differently? And Common said yes. I say yes as well.
I mean, I think it's the timing issues because it's going from a Thursday night. Like, if you have that with a Sunday game where you're going to have like 3, 4, 5 days of breakouts, then you have to treat it differently as far as delaying.
Oh, they were the Thursday night game?
The Ravens and the Steelers were, yeah. So they were going to get pushed back to Wednesday because that's about 6 days of the outbreak. Well, the outbreak started like the Sunday or the Monday before. So if you have like that shifted window kind of, Thursday night actually kind of saved them playing the game in Week 12, quite frankly.
Yeah, I just didn't know why the NFL didn't push back the Broncos game to Tuesday.
They could have, and I don't know either. It's dual standards, I guess. It's not. I don't think it's particularly fair from a competitive balance standpoint, but whatever.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, anywho, if all this stuff is complicated, I think we've just about covered it. But we do want to start talking about the playoffs. They're not that far away. You mentioned it, Tom. We're a few weeks away from Week 17. Could have Week 18. We don't know what's going to happen. But what we do know is we're going to have at least a few teams who haven't won a playoff game in recent years. Here, I thought I wrote it down on the computer, but I've got it on the phone. So we got the Cleveland Browns at 8-3. The last playoff win for the Cleveland Browns, 1994. I believe Bill Belichick was their coach at the time. The Buffalo Bills, 8-3. Their last playoff win, 1995. Dolphins, 7-4. Last playoff win in 2000. So of these three teams that are currently in playoff position, of course, you can choose to say that those slipped, and certainly Miami at 7-4 would be the one to slip. But right now, Buffalo and Cleveland, especially Buffalo, look to be in great shape to make the playoffs. Of those three teams, who is most likely to win a playoff game, and will one of them actually win a game in the playoffs? Since we haven't seen it in more than 20 years for some of them.
Well, I think that if the standings kind of remain as they currently are, something's going to have to give. Buffalo, I believe, is the team that would be matched up with the Browns, if I have this read correctly, in that 4 and 5 spot, with the Steelers taking the first round bye. Kansas City and Tennessee would have matchups with Indianapolis and Miami. Something would have to give in that game. I think that Buffalo is probably the best team of the bunch to win at least one game, possibly two, depending on the matchup that they get. The team that I agree with, Common, is Miami stands the greatest chance of slipping, simply because they have the toughest schedule, I think, going down the stretch of the last 4 games here. Pulling it up right now, I believe they have the Chiefs. Yeah, they have they have a game against the Bengals. That's the last team that they play that has a losing record. And looking back at their past schedule, they've been pretty decent against some of the lower teams. They've struggled against some of the better teams. Already lost to the Bills, so that's a little bit of a playoff tiebreaker if it comes down to it.
Though. So they've been up and down against some of the better teams. Not just
they have been up and down, yeah. Yeah, so they could. I think that they're probably the team most likely to slip out. I think the Colts are probably solid to stay in the playoff running, and it'll kind of become Dolphins, Ravens, Raiders. Who among those teams are going to get that last spot? Unless we go to Week 18, then it's a whole different ballgame.
Sure. I would like to disagree with you there, by the way. I actually think the Browns, to me, are the most likely to drop out. I think the Bills are the most likely to win. Of those three teams, they have by far the best offense. Neither of those other teams have a very good offense. The Browns are a big question mark for me because they're 8-3, but they haven't beaten anyone. They lost by 30 to the Ravens, 31 to the Steelers, by 10 to the Raiders. Those are the only good teams that played except for Indianapolis. They beat the Colts. That's their only good win, and they still got to play the Steelers and Ravens, and they're playing Tennessee this week. So that's 3 games they could lose right there, lose a couple more. It's the Browns. They could go to 9-7 and miss out. Most likely, I think all 3 teams get in. I think Miami rolls against the Bengals. I think Miami can also beat the Patriots, who they have on the schedule. But I would say the Browns, to me, are the most likely to slip out. And I really don't like their offense. I mean, they have a very good run game, but it's hard to be one-dimensional. They're one of the worst passing teams. Meanwhile, Miami has the second-best scoring defense. I would put Miami as more likely to make a run than Cleveland. But I think Buffalo is overall the best team. But they're known for choking. Even when they were good, they had those 4 years in a row they lost in the Super Bowl. So who knows? The Bills, they choked last year against the Texans. They should have won a playoff game last year, frankly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this year the Bills will get their first playoff win since 1995. The Browns, you're an 8-3 team. You have a negative 21 turnover point differential. That's shocking. So I don't buy the Browns. They may end up making the playoffs. I think they will. But in the playoffs, it could be tough sledding for them. As for the Dolphins, you just never know what to expect. They have the best point differential in the AFC East. So I think they could surprise people in the playoffs. And, depending on the matchup, they could win a game.
So you got the Dolphins more likely than the Bills, or who do you have there?
I have the Bills more likely than the Dolphins, but that's my 1-2.
Sure. I completely agree with you, which doesn't always happen, but we're completely on the same page. Tom, though, it sounds like you've got Cleveland more likely than Miami.
Simply because they have 8 wins in the bank already, and 2 of their last 5 games are against the New York Giants and the New York Jets. And granted, the Giants have been playing a little bit better, but I count those as 2 pretty solid wins in the column for Cleveland. It's really hard, especially when you have 7 teams going to the playoffs, to see a 10-6 team sliding out.
No, they'll make it, but in terms of even if they make it, I think Miami actually is a little bit better football team because they're so elite.
It's 2 different questions. If Miami gets in, I think that they are a better team than Cleveland. It's just I think that they have such a difficult schedule that if things don't break their way, if they're not able to overcome some of these really good teams, that they might not even make it. So it's more of, can they get to the playoffs? Once they're in, I think they're fine.
I think they're going to get in.
I think that they will too. It's just that because of record and schedule, they stand a better chance of not making it. I think it's not entirely on their merit one way or another.
Well, I got same scenario, different teams in the NFC. So the Tampa Bay Bucks have been that kind of hot Super Bowl pick, but I was on their bandwagon, and I'm getting ready to jump off the bandwagon after this array of inconsistent performances. They made the game close late against the Chiefs, but, man, that was all Chiefs. That was not indicative of the game. And the thing about the Bucks, to me, that's crazy is we talk a lot about Tom Brady and the interceptions and the bad play, but their defense has been highly inconsistent as well. In the games against New Orleans and Kansas City completely got torched. They played great against the Packers. So I don't know. What do you guys think? The Bucks, are they more likely? And again, they can also slide out of the playoffs now at 7-5. Are they more likely to make the Super Bowl or to lose a playoff game, or not win a single playoff game?
Man, that's a tough one. Obviously, I think in the playoffs, you don't want to bet against Tom Brady, and I think the Bucks will make the playoffs. They have the Falcons twice, the Lions and the Vikings. They should win at least 3 of those games, no problem. And I think, 2 on the road, 2 at home, so they should win 3 of those games, and they would likely make the playoffs in that scenario. But
sure, I agree.
Man, I don't know. Once you get in the playoffs, you just never know with Tom Brady. But you're right. The defense has to step up because the defense has just not been good the last few weeks.
Tom, go ahead. I have a point, but you can go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I think just like on your question of are they more likely to lose their first playoff game or win the Super Bowl, I mean, like obviously mathematically they're more likely to lose one game.
Oh, sure.
To make the Super Bowl. I think the more likely outcome, I mean, just kind of like looking at the standings right here, who they might be lining up against. Let's see, we have Seattle and Arizona as it currently stands, which leaves Green Bay and Tampa Bay. And we saw what Tampa Bay did to Green Bay earlier this season. I think that'd be a fascinating part two. Fingers crossed we get that because I would watch the hell out of that game. I think a more likely outcome is they probably win a game in the playoffs, depending on seeding and matchup. I think probably win a game. I don't see them making the Super Bowl, let alone winning it. They're just, like you said, too inconsistent, and there's a little bit of a clash between the quarterback you have and the offensive philosophy that you have on that team. Bruce Arians likes to throw it deep and stretch the field. That's not Tom Brady's game. You have talented receivers with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Antonio Brown's been pretty decent. I think that if they had a little bit better system in place for trying to work in some more slants, more crossing routes, get the ball to the playmakers and let them make the plays as opposed to putting all the onus on the quarterback, I think if we saw a little bit better blend of that, that would work out really, really well. But, it's a coaching system, no training camp this far into the season. I see inconsistencies for this team ahead as well.
Well, so you brought up a point that I was going to bring up. You kind of beat me to it. But Tom Brady and Bruce Arians do not seem to be clicking on the same page. You mentioned it. Really, Arians loves to stretch the field. Brady can throw the deep ball, but he really likes to work on it, off of play action. They don't run the ball enough. He likes to hit Gronkowski, some of those short routes as well, kind of more of a mix-it-up, decision-type game. And this late into the season, it is concerning that they haven't figured it out. I actually think they're more likely to lose their first game because of how the schedule sets up. Currently the 6th seed, the Rams are the 5 seed, but the Rams already beat them head-to-head. So Tampa likely will have to go 4-0 to possibly surpass the Rams. So if they stay the 6th seed, some of the teams they're looking at potentially Seattle, Green Bay, and if they somehow get the 7th seed or New Orleans flips, possibly New Orleans. We've seen how much trouble New Orleans has gotten them. Seattle defense all of a sudden starting to look good. Also, they got the news today. Josh Gordon is eligible to come off the drug list. I don't know if you guys caught that. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to get into that, but if anything, he would for sure make them better. Certainly won't make them worse. We can argue about how much better. But the thing the Bucs have struggled with is passing quarterbacks and passing offenses. I look at Seattle, I look at Green Bay, I look at New Orleans. Those are all teams that could pass the ball very well. Yes, they played great against Green Bay, but that was an off game for Rodgers. He actually missed some passes early in the game. Things could have looked different. I don't like them against any of those teams. However, if they can somehow get the 5 seed, which is possible, as Drew mentioned, their schedule down the stretch is not that hard, and obviously the Rams will have a lot of tough division games to go. If they can somehow get the 5 seed, then they would play Washington or New York most likely. Possible Dallas or Philly, who knows in that division. So a lot of it depends on seeding, but I think if they don't get to play one of those bad teams, I would actually pick against the Bucs. I think it's where are you now? I mean, you talk about Tom Brady in the playoffs. Well, he doesn't have the same Patriots defense as he used to have. He doesn't have the same coaching staff, and we saw him last year. He lost in the first round of the playoffs last year as well. So it's about where you are now. This isn't, 35-year-old Tom Brady. This is almost 45. He's 43. I think they're going to have a hard time winning a playoff game, and I've been saying it all season. They're going to figure it out. They're going to figure it out. Well, guess what? 10 games in, 12 games in, actually. They haven't had a bye week. 12 games in, they're going to figure it out. I don't think so. And some of those teams they have left, by the way, the Falcons, Lions, and I can't remember who else, they're all good.
Vikings.
I could see them going, the Vikings, they're okay. I can see them possibly going 2-2. I would pick 3-1. But I don't know. I don't really like Tampa Bay anymore. I take back my Tampa Bay love. I'll admit when I'm wrong. I'll flip-flop. I'm very low on Tampa Bay right now. I'm still very high in the Chiefs, though, and I'm still very high in the Steelers, as I have been all year. But Tampa Bay, I'm trending downwards.
Well, I would hope you're still high on them. Those two, the Chiefs and the Steelers, are combined, 21-1 or whatever. So I would hope you're still high on them.
Right, but I've picked the Steelers against the Titans, the Steelers against the Ravens the first time around. You guys picked against them. My point is I've had Pittsburgh locked in as the number 2 best team in football since about week 3 or 4 before everyone was talking about the undefeated season. So, anywho, I'm just saying, I'll be adamant and passionate and, I'm right a little bit more often than I'm wrong, but when I'm wrong, I will backpedal, I'll backtrack. You can call me a flip-flopper, but I'm down on the Bucs all of a sudden.
Well, but before you swan dive off the bandwagon here, does it do anything for you that I know it's cherry-picking information, but if you take away those 2 Saints games where they got blown out, the Buccaneers have lost by a total of 7 points, and they are the 3 losses. By 1 to the Bears, by 3 to the Chiefs, and by 3 to, who's the other one?
2 to the Giants, I think.
The Rams. They lost by 3 to the Rams, by 3 to the Chiefs, and by 1 to the Bears. So in 3 of the 5 losses, they've been really, really competitive at the end. But
I'd argue it the other way, Tom. I'd argue it the other way because when they've had to be competitive, they haven't had an answer. This is ironic to say that Tom Brady's not clutch, good in the clutch, and he has been his whole career, but Tom Brady has been horrible in the clutch. I'd flip it the other way and say that they've had some really comfortable wins, and the close games they've had, they've lost them all. The New York game, New York actually scored late in the game to make it closer than it was, but Tampa was up late in that game. If it wasn't for the Giants getting that late score, they could have gotten the 2. So anytime they've had to go down the field for a game-tying or game-winning drive this year, they haven't come up in the clutch. And that to me is concerning because, again, I live in the now. I think it's very easy for people to become enamored with Tom Brady and who he was. But at the moment, Tom Brady is an inconsistent quarterback. And when it's crunch time and when the going gets tough, they haven't played well. I think when things are going well for them against weaker teams and they're rolling, with that talent, it's easy for them to roll. But in the close games, they played very poorly in the close games. And I think in the playoffs, close games, hello. So, I don't trust Tom Brady in a close game right now. I really don't.
Well, I know you're kind of, saying Brady isn't good anymore, but, you look at the losses here, obviously the Saints, the 38-3 blowout, that's just, a game you want to forget. But against the Rams, the leading rusher for the Bucs was Ronald Jones II with 24 yards. Against the Chiefs, it was Jones II with 66 yards. So in these losses, they're not running the ball very well, and that's not Tom Brady's issue. That's the offensive line. Or Bruce Arians'
fault, which is also part of the problem because the quarterback and the coach and the offense, they don't have a system. They don't know what they're doing. They can win some games on talent alone. By the way, Tom Brady is still a solid quarterback, but he's inconsistent. He has great receivers around him and great targets. So there are games they can win on talent alone, but they don't have the right camaraderie. They don't have the right system. They don't have the right game plan. Even even on the defensive side, you saw their coach one-on-one against Tyreek Hill. They gave up 202 receiving yards. I think part of the problem with the Buccaneers is the coaching staff and the game planning. They just don't have something that works. I agree with you. The running backs should be getting more rush yards, but part of that isn't even their fault. Part of it is the Bucs aren't looking to establish the run. They're looking to air it out. That's what they're looking to do. They're playing backyard football, and you wonder why Jameis Winston had 30 interceptions or what it is last year. Well, this is part of it. This is how they played. So while Jameis isn't a great decision maker, this is part of what the Bucs do. That's what they did last year, and that's why he had 30 interceptions.
He also couldn't see
a game plan or a system.
He also needed to get LASIK in the offseason.
Yes.
Which isn't really something to laugh about, I guess, but it's
he
is a little bit
needs the LASIK to read the clipboard because he's backing up Taysom Hill instead of Drew Brees, so he's got to read the clipboard and help him out. That's where he really needs it. I don't know. If you're buying stock, if it's the stock market, buy down on the Bucs.
I mean, if it's a stock market, I am buying as much of the Bucs as I can right now because they're low. Buy low, sell high. Isn't that right?
Well, I'm not an expert in the stock market, but I don't like this Tampa Bay team. I don't think they're going to win a playoff game. I really don't. Now, if they click, they put it all together, they get a few breaks. We know Tom Brady is notorious for getting breaks in the playoffs. Yeah, they could win then. But, there's a lot of, like I said, Tom Brady isn't clicking, he's not playing right, they don't have the offense. But what scares me also
is thankfully they have a bye week then to figure it out.
They do have a bye week to figure it out, but their defense is unbelievable against the run. But you look at some of the top teams in the NFC, a lot of those teams are very good passing teams. I don't see them shutting down those great passing teams. They go up against Seattle, good luck.
Well, to bring the stock metaphor home before we transition over to college football, I'm going to hold my stock on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm not confident enough to buy that they'll come out of the slow point that they're in. I'm not willing to sell off either because I could lose some money on that. So shifting over to what are you buying, what are you selling out of the college football playoff rankings. We had the rankings come out, the second iteration of the rankings come out on Tuesday. We still have Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, and Ohio State after they had their game against Illinois canceled. Ohio State at 4-0 is still the fourth team in the college football playoff.
They should be.
As it stands, Ohio State is almost on the verge of not qualifying for the Big Ten championship game. You have to have 10 games, and if something happens against Michigan State or Michigan, because the state of Michigan is going through a really tough time with COVID, especially on Ann Arbor's campus, they might not get to 6 games. What are you guys buying and selling about the college football playoff rankings as of right now?
Well, so first off, I will preface this what I think, and I'll ask you guys this question because I think right now, to me, Ohio State is number 4. I'm a believer in rank the teams based on who the top 4 teams are, and I think certainly with resumes and strength of schedules, you can get into that. But, if you have a team that you think is top 4 in the country and they're undefeated, they belong in the top 4. I think Ohio State belongs in the top 4. I think where it gets really interesting, as you mentioned, Tom, if they don't get to play in the Big Ten title game because they play 6 games, that is where it gets very complicated. I will say this game against Michigan State is really key to get this one in. At this point, we're recording on Thursday. Things do look good for that game. Larry Johnson would be the first black head coach to be the head coach for a game for them because Ryan Day is out because of COVID, so that could be a cool storyline. But I think if they get this game in, if another team cancels in the Big Ten, another game gets canceled, they can match up against one of those opponents, and they could play the same team twice also. They're allowing that as well. So I'm not 100% sure if the Michigan game gets canceled that they're out. But for the sake of argument, I'm going to throw this out there. Let's say they play this game this weekend. They win big. They roll. They go 5-0, and then they don't play next weekend. Ohio State 5-0, no Big Ten title game. Do they make the college football playoff? Because I think that they still do because they're getting penalized for something that's out of their control. And I think they're still one of the top 4 teams in the country. They're very good on offense. They're very good on defense. There's absolutely no weaknesses with this football team. They're top 4 in the country. They deserve to make the playoff regardless of whether they play in the Big Ten title game.
That's a tough one.
Yeah,
I just don't know what the committee, historically the committee has valued conference championships. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair.
Yeah, so at that point, what do you – I don't know. I guess it just depends on what they value.
I didn't write this down. I'm talking off the top of my head, and you might correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll look this up after I get done talking. But I think there was one year, actually, where Penn State was the Big Ten champion and Ohio State got in instead of Penn State because Penn State had 2 losses. They beat Ohio State head-to-head. They advanced to the Big Ten title game. Penn State was Big Ten champ with 2 losses. Ohio State lost to Penn State, didn't win the Big Ten, and they still got in the playoff. Is that right? I believe that's true.
That sounds pretty right, and that's the one thing where yes, the CFP definitely values conference championships. True, I 100% agree with you on that, as they should, but they've also shown that they value the name brand a little bit more. If you do like a blind resume, a blind look at the resumes, and you look at Ohio State, they've beaten an atrocious Nebraska team, they've beaten an atrocious Penn State team. They've beaten an atrocious Rutgers team. They've beaten a pretty good Indiana team. And then going up against Michigan State and Michigan, it's middling to atrocious depending on who you ask. So if you look at a blind resume of what exactly they've done to earn to get into the college football playoff, take away the Ohio State University logo on it, I'm not so sure on merit that they would get some consideration. Now, because they're Ohio State, because they'll throw a hell of a fit if they're not in, especially because they weren't able to get enough games in to qualify for a championship, I think Ohio State will still be in. I think there's also some rumblings, and I might have this wrong. The Big Ten might actually end up dropping the 6-game requirement or finding some way to finagle it, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have Ohio State as ranked the 4th best team in the country and also not qualifying for your conference championship. So the Big Ten is going to be shifting some stuff around as well to make sure that Ohio State is well taken care of, because the Big Ten needs Ohio State more than Ohio State needs the Big Ten.
Sure, but Tom, real quick, because you mentioned you think they're going to get in. I think so, and I think they deserve it. Would you put them in yourself if they go 5-0 and don't play in the Big Ten title game?
Well, it kind of comes down to a couple other teams, right? Like if Florida were to beat Alabama and win the SEC championship,
okay, Alabama beats Florida. Let's say Alabama beats Florida.
Well, if Alabama beats Florida, let's see, we're looking at A&M. I don't think so. Florida, I don't think so. Yeah, like if Alabama beats Florida, sure. Like Ohio State probably is still that last team in. I'd probably put them, but again, like with the whole blind resume thing, like, do you put a team that maybe has a loss but has played a fuller schedule with some better competition? I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen by any stretch.
Strength of schedule, because BYU is 13 in the college football playoff, and they're 9-0, and they've got like an 8-7 strength of schedule. But then again, we're talking about a mid-major where they're valuing them. And real quickly, 2016, 2017, that scenario that I talked about, Ohio State was 11-1, Penn State was 11-2, Big Ten champion. They did pick Ohio State in the playoff instead of Penn State that year.
And did that happen with Alabama too at one point, right? Where Alabama got in over somebody else? I think that was outside the conference though, where Alabama was like the 4th team. I'll look it up.
Right. Yeah, Alabama 2017, 2018 was the 4 seed. Georgia was the 3 seed. Ohio State was the 5 that year. Real quickly, though, 2016, 2017, I believe that's the year Ohio State got in as a 3 seed, and they won the whole thing, by the way. Was that not the year they won it? I think they won it that year. They did.
Quite possibly.
So they did, yeah.
Right.
So that tells you that they made the right decision. Drew, what do you think about this whole Ohio State thing?
Yeah, I just don't know. I think they're a really good team, but, you know, you haven't played – if you've only played 4 or 5 games, yeah, is it enough? It's a small sample size, but at the same time, who do you put in? Do you throw in A&M? Do you throw in Cincinnati if they're still undefeated? It's a tough question, and, yeah, I don't quite know what I would do. I think Ohio State is definitely a talented team. But do they have enough games played, I guess, is going to come down to the question, and that'll be on the mind of the committee.
Yeah, they didn't win the national championship that year. Actually, they won it another year. But not 2014, 2015, they won it as a 4. Anywho, though, so who would be the team that you do slide in there? So let's say Florida loses to Alabama. And you don't put in Ohio State. You've got your Alabama as your SEC champion. You've got Clemson and Notre Dame both make it in, assuming Clemson does beat them in the ACC title game, which I think will happen. Who do you put in then as the team on the outside looking in right now?
Are we saying because Ohio State definitely is not going to be in? Because
if Ohio State doesn't make it, or if, say, Clemson loses to Notre Dame, if one of these top 4 teams that are in the rankings right now, if someone slips out, whoever it may be, but we're assuming it's Ohio State, who is the team that gets in? And I'm going to make it, get rid of this whole Florida beats Alabama. Let's say Florida loses to Alabama. Who do you – because obviously if Florida beats Alabama, they're in. Alabama would still be in because it's Alabama. Florida loses to Alabama. Who gets in instead of Ohio State if they do deem to let Ohio State out? But I also think they're going to put Ohio State in no matter what.
Well, you're going by records. You got to go by record then, right? I mean, you can't put a 2-loss team in. I'm not sure a 2-loss team has ever made the college football playoff. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
They haven't. I'm looking at it right now. 2-loss team has never made the playoff. I have it pulled up.
So you can't put a 2-loss team in.
Sure.
So maybe you go Cincinnati if they're still undefeated.
Tom, what do you think?
Probably A&M simply because their only loss has been to Alabama. So if we're going with, how good your loss is, I'm looking at Cincinnati's schedule right now. They beat a ranked Army, ranked SMU, and they have a ranked Tulsa team up on, that is Tulsa.
They're going to play
up on their schedule.
Back weeks actually in the conference title game, so they could get 2 wins in a row against Tulsa. However, what did hurt Cincinnati's case is SMU just had a bad loss, so SMU
it's probably A&M
at the end. I also think it's A&M, and you kind of said it, Tom. I think they've got 1 loss to Alabama. They did look very shaky against LSU though. They didn't look like themselves on offense. Their talented quarterback Trevor Mon did not look good at all in that game. So I was a little concerned. I was ready to hop on the A&M train, but I think they look very poor against LSU. But assuming they get back on track, I think A&M would have to be the team that gets in if they boot someone out. I think they're going to go with A&M. I do think, though, the committee is going to find a way to put Ohio State in. Assuming Ohio State doesn't have a loss, Ohio State's getting in. Ohio State is kind of like, I call them the big 3 in college football. You got Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State, and then you have everybody else.
I mean, I think even if Ohio State, say, Big Ten contrives a way to get them into the title game and they lose that, I still think Ohio State gets in. I think if Notre Dame beats Clemson, Clemson still gets in. I mean, it's a weird year with COVID, and we don't know how they're going to be handling all the different bowl games this year, if they're going to be dropping some of those or what's going to be going on with that.
Already.
I think they're just going to go kind of like, okay, here are the 4 teams that we think are the best in the country and that the most people are going to want to watch. I think merit's going to go a little bit out the window this year, and that makes sense.
Say that Ohio State would make it even if they lose the Big Ten title game, because I disagree there, because they would have so few games, and the Big Ten is very down right now. The argument against Ohio State would be, you laid it out, the conference doesn't look very good this year.
Sure.
I think if they make the Big Ten title game and lose, I think they're out.
Like if they lose to, say, like a Wisconsin. Wisconsin is a pretty solid program.
They don't have enough games. If you're talking about a team that doesn't have enough games, it would be Northwestern they play, I think.
What I'm saying is that the Big Ten would probably adjust the standards that they have set to make sure that Ohio State could be represented in the game. And if they're making an exception for Ohio State, they may as well make an exception for Wisconsin. So yeah, like if they lose in the title game to Wisconsin, I could still see the playoff football committee just being like, put them in. We don't care. Like everybody wants to see Ohio State type of thing. Like I don't necessily think that's the right thing to do.
Likely the Big Ten title game opponent would be Northwestern. They actually beat Wisconsin head to head.
Sure.
They have a tie break there.
That'd be fun.
Northwestern, and the likelihood of Northwestern beating Ohio State is pretty small.
Small, very small. Speaking of things that are also going to be small chances of happening, is a small chance of this Gonzaga-Baylor game on Saturday in college basketball being anything other than a great game to watch. I'm excited for this one. I'm excited for a lot of the basketball season coming up. Gonzaga has gotten off to a great start, beating Kansas and was it West Virginia, the other team that's ranked. They've been playing a really, really tough schedule. I think that there's
Auburn, who's
what's up?
Who's not ranked but a respectable program.
For sure, yeah. No, like, what are you guys looking forward to on the game this weekend?
Yeah, it's a 1:00 game. You gotta like that 1:00 on CBS.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good lead-in.
It's 12 o'clock Central Time. Some of us 12 o'clock Central Time zone, Drew.
It's a 1:00 Eastern tip-off, and then that leads into the 3:30 Eastern game on CBS, the football game, of course. So it's a neutral site game. In Indianapolis, both teams have been there for a little while now because both teams played there over the weekend, or I guess not over the weekend, but this past week on Wednesday. So, I think it's going to be a heck of a game. Baylor's got, a good team. Gonzaga, a lot of returning guys, and it's kind of –
He's a talented freshman point guard. I love him.
It's going to be Gonzaga's offense against Baylor's defense. So we'll see which one wins, I guess.
Yeah, real quick, both teams are averaging 93 points per game so far early in the season. Obviously, only 3 games for Gonzaga, 2 games for Baylor. Baylor also
3 games for Baylor. 3 games.
3 games. So they're both 3-0, I believe.
Yeah.
Baylor also beat a very good Illinois team who was ranked 5th in the country, which probably a little overseeded, but nonetheless, they spanked them. I watched the game last night. I watched some of the Gonzaga-Kansas game because that football game got out of hand on Thanksgiving. And I was so impressed by Gonzaga, I was ready to say Gonzaga's clearly the best team in the country. And then I watched Baylor against Illinois, and I was like, man, Baylor is really good. They hit some tough threes. They played really strong defense. It's really, really tough. I think Gonzaga beat West Virginia by, I think, only 5, but part of that is because Jalen Suggs, who's the top-rated recruit in Gonzaga history, a freshman point guard, went down, got hurt, showed some toughness to come back in the game. He wasn't really scoring the ball much, but just his floor leadership and him running the game, a guy that averages about 6 assists a game, he was key in helping them come back in the second half. This game really could go either way. Both of these teams are incredibly balanced. If you take a look at their scoring, they don't necessarily have one guy who does it all. I think Gonzaga has 2 guys that average over 20 points a game. Baylor has 3 guys who are all in that 16 to 17 range. Tons of depth. I think it's hard to really say who the best team is until we see them play. So I'm definitely looking forward to watching that game. For the sake of having to make a pick, I would take Gonzaga in that one just because I think their offense is so good.
Yeah, I think the only thing that would shock me about this game on Saturday is if it's a blowout in either direction. You guys have covered pretty well the merits for both teams. I think the great thing about this matchup so early in the season is that it kind of feels like they're playing for the number 1 seed in the tournament overall, right? Like, I know that's looking really way far ahead. I know Gonzaga still has a game against Iowa, who's currently ranked 3rd in the country. I know Baylor's going to have a bunch of good games too.
Gonzaga, you keep calling him Gonzaga. I think we decided last week it was Gonzaga.
So I have heard it both ways, okay? Because I read
Gonzaga.
it as Gonzaga, but I've also heard announcers and commentators call it Gonzaga.
Gonzaga.
So
Gonzaga.
Okay.
Gonzaga.
We go with Gonzaga.
Gonzaga.
Matters.
I'm inevitably going to let my accent get in the way. Okay, Gonzaga. I've got to make a concerted effort.
Gonzaga, yes.
Gonzaga. I think they will.
There you go.
I'm going to mess it up. I promise you that, and unintentionally. They're still going to have a lot of big games ahead of them, but this one feels like they're playing for the number 1 overall seed in the tournament in March this year.
Real quickly, obviously Gonzaga doesn't have as tough of a conference as Baylor. So if Gonzaga wins this game, they're almost a lock to get that 1 seed. I mean,
it's December.
They're playing Iowa later.
I'd say they're in good shape.
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, they're in really good shape, but it is December. You know, we're 4 games in. It's a crazy season. You know, the WCC. You know, San Francisco just beat.
Right?
Yeah, I think so. You know, Pepperdine took UCLA to triple overtime. So, you know, the WCC isn't bad. So, you know, it's not a lock, that's for sure.
Well, no, that's fair. You are right. It's December.
Yeah.
I'm probably getting a little carried away, but most likely, though.
Of course you are. You always get carried away.
Honestly, though, most likely the winner of this game, as Tom said it, goes a long way towards getting the number 1 seed. You mentioned the UCLA loss. Is the Pac-12 down, or are the Mizzou Tigers that good? Because I watched Mizzou last night, and, man, they looked really good. Now, of course, Mizzou looked very good last year against Florida and Auburn as well, and that didn't lead to anything. But the Mizzou Tigers, 2-0, big win over number 21 Oregon, 8-point win last night. I watched that game as well.
Yeah, I did not watch that one. That was too late for me.
You were in bed? And that was 8 o'clock Central Time tip-off, so that would have been 9 o'clock Eastern. You were definitely in bed.
Yeah, it's too late for me.
Did you watch the Mizzou game, Tom?
I cannot say that I caught it, no.
Oh, well, Xavier Pinson was amazing. It's all
I
about
read recaps, though. It sounded like they had a really strong win.
They did. That was the best game, one of the best games Mizzou has played in recent memory because they didn't turn the ball over, and a lot of times when a team puts pressure on them late, they tend to blow games. They've had a lot of like those really good games where they win by 20, but they haven't had one of those games where they're up like 10 to 15 and they like hold it steady, and that's what they did, winning by 8 points. Anywho,
quick little trivia note that I saw that I can't remember if I saw this on Twitter. I can't remember if it was Dave Matter or it was somebody from on the Mizzou beat that said that like the past 4 times that Mizzou's beaten a top 25 team, it's always been the 21st ranked team. It was just it was some bizarre little thing that I saw. I didn't like take a screenshot or save it or anything. I just kind of like scrolled past it, but it's like 3 or 4 of the Pats matchups they've had been against specifically the number 21 ranked team that they've defeated. I just thought that was interesting.
It's also
a fun
their
little sports thing.
It's also their first win that was over a top 25 team that was not a home game for them. So
really,
since 2012,
was that a true road game?
I
No, that was Omaha. That was in Omaha.
No,
it was a neutral.
It was a neutral floor game, so it wasn't a true road game. The last time they beat a top 25 team not at home was in 2012 against Illinois in the bragging rights game in St. Louis. So
8 years ago.
Yeah, we were in college still. We were students.
Huh.
Yes, we were. Yes, we were.
We went to the zoo. We probably remember that game. That might have been the game. That might have been 2011. That was the crazy game where Mizzou was up 1 and they ended up winning by 10 because of Lawrence Bowers' two technicals on Illinois and
I don't remember the year of that one. That was a December game though. That was like during winter break, or probably December 20 something. One of those games.
I'll talk to you about that game after the show. I don't know if you remember something.
I do remember the game. Of course I do.
Okay, good.
It was a heck of a ball game.
There may have been a wager on a certain result by how much a team wins, and a certain someone may have gotten Tom Castleman, as we say on this show now, bad beat at the end of the game. And it may not have been me. It may have been someone else. Anywho, great college game, a great game to look forward to. Just a few weeks away from the NBA season, though. We got the big Christmas schedule out, 5 games. There'll be Lakers and Mavericks at 7 o'clock is kind of the big game. LeBron James, Luka Doncic, Steph Curry also back will play on opening night against the Nets, and former teammate Kevin Durant. We haven't seen those two guys much the last 2 years. But I mentioned LeBron James, kind of one of the big stories. We'll get to the Russell Westbrook and John Wall trade after this. But one of the big stories is the Lakers have their guys back. They got LeBron James signed to a 2-year extension. They've got him for 3 more years. And they got Anthony Davis to a 5-year deal. So, guys, Also, they got Montrezl Harrell in the offseason. They got KCP back. They got Dennis Schroeder. So Harrell,
Wesley Matthews,
Marc Gasol. I mean, they lost Howard and Rondo, but they upgraded with younger and better guys, as LeBron said. He said, we're younger. Those are King James's words, not mine. So what do you guys see in the Lakers with LeBron and Davis together for at least 3 more years? How many championships can they win? Of course, LeBron has 4 championships. Jordan has 6. Are we approaching Jordan territory here?
I mean, they're going to be the favorite every year that team, AD and LeBron are together with all these great role players as well. They're going to be the favorites, so it's going to depend on, well, who wants to upset this team, and right now it's honestly too early to tell.
Tom?
Yeah, I think that the last time that we talked about LeBron James and him predicting, how many titles we might be winning, not 6, not 7, I think that gets a little bit tricky. The NBA changes a lot from year to year. I think
he was
for
foreshadowing total rings by himself.
Well, Tom, remember, Rome wasn't built in one day. Remember that.
It was not, no. I think that the Lakers are a really talented team. They've done a great job finding the right complementary pieces. I know a lot of people like to talk about put shooting around LeBron James, but I think the more underrated thing is put passing around LeBron James. Put other guys that can move the ball. Marc Gasol is known as a great passer, and he's a much better upgrade pretty much in every category over the Dwight Howard, and was it JaVale McGee was also on their team last year, kind of filling out that center role. So they definitely did a lot of the right things to make this team better for next year. I'm going to say that they're the favorite to win the title next year. I'm not going to project 2 more years out because we just don't know how the landscape's going to shift. We don't know if other certain superstars might be traded, and even if that doesn't mean that they're
already talking about
Giannis, James Harden, we don't know how things are going to be shifting. So I think for this year, sure, Lakers are the favorite. I have a difficult time saying that they're going to win 2 or 3 of the next 3 championships. I'm not willing to just leap both feet in on that. I think there's way too much in flux to make that kind of prediction confidently.
Sure. Well, first off, real quickly, to that point, and you can go and read a great article on ESPN.com that references the Lakers' contract deals. But interestingly enough, outside of LeBron and Davis, all of their players, except for I think 1 or 2, almost their entire team is on a 1-year deal. I believe Gasol might be 2, and Montrezl Harrell has an option on his year next year, which
Pope is 3. Caldwell Pope is 3 years.
Okay. Anywho, you can read the exact breakdown on the article, but basically in the article it says that most of their roster is basically on 1-year deals with the exception of a few players. So how their roster looks this year compared to how it looks 2 years from now and 3 years from now is very different. However, as far as how many rings they're going to win, I think they're almost a near lock to me this year. Assuming they stay healthy, I think they got better. We mentioned about all these moves they made, and just as importantly, it appears that a lot of their competition got worse. We talk about the Clippers being a legitimate contender. Can they put it together year 2? Well, yeah, he's their 3rd or 4th best player, but losing Montrezl Harrell does hurt. They just became a little weaker. The Lakers just became a little stronger. The gap moved a little bit between those guys. We had Gordon Hayward leaving the Celtics. Obviously, Klay Thompson got hurt on the Warriors. We got the KD and Kyrie thing. We haven't seen them play together. We've seen LeBron and Davis that they can already work. So not only have the Lakers gotten better in the offseason, their competition has gotten worse, quite frankly. So assuming LeBron and Anthony Davis both stay healthy, obviously injuries and whole COVID stuff could play a factor in the playoffs. It didn't this past year. But obviously, assuming everyone stays healthy, I think the Lakers win this one. And, gosh, you get LeBron James to 5 titles. He's going to get 6. I really think so. I think in the next 3 years, I can confidently predict them winning at least 2 championships. And I think they're going to win back-to-back in the next 2 years because eventually LeBron will slow down, but I think he looks at it as this is his window. the next 2 to 3 years are very important before I slow down. He hasn't shown signs of doing it yet, so I'm going to rely on him for at least 2 more years at elite level. He's never had a three-peat in the NBA. We measure success of three-peats. Jordan had 2 of them. I think LeBron wants that three-peat. I think he's going to win this year. He's going to win next year. And all of a sudden, LeBron and Jordan will have 6 rings. Let me throw this one out there. You guys both know that I think rings are overrated when talking about the greatest of all time. I've got LeBron and Jordan at a virtual tie, but I think by the time they're done, I'll have LeBron James just inches ahead of him because of longevity, and he'll have all the points, assists. He'll be number 1 all-time in scoring, number 2 or 3 in assists. But anywho, LeBron James gets 7 rings. Will he be remembered as better than Jordan? Because I think if he gets to 6, he won't. But let's say he gets to 7. What will the public think?
Well, I don't know what the public will think, but, man, LeBron is, he's you have to think at some point he's going to regress, correct? I mean, Michael Jordan won all those championships. He was in his prime, and I'm not saying LeBron, I'm guessing he's on the, towards the end of his prime. We'll say that. I know he's probably the best player in the NBA still, but, he's not a spring chicken. And so you have to think that at some point he's going to regress. Now, I know he has Anthony Davis and everybody helping him out, but you've got to think that at some point, he's going to regress and some other team is going to just be enough for him. Or to win the championship over him.
Real quick, Drew. So here's what I think.
We had an audio change here for comments.
Well, are you hearing my voice back after I talk a little bit, or is that just me freaking out?
That's just you.
Yeah. Okay, maybe I very faintly hear it. So I wanted to test it with headphones. Anywho, real quick, the difference between what you mentioned about Michael Jordan. Well, Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen were older in '98. Anthony Davis is much younger. And, again, it's different with the modern medicine. You got these modern medicines, all this training and all these different things. It's much easier in sports to play to an older age than it was back then. I think that goes a long way. Is why we're seeing it in all sports. We have Roger Federer doing great in tennis. He's 39, which never happens in tennis. Tom Brady's 43 in the NFL. We've got soccer players also, older. Cristiano Ronaldo, as much as I hate to say it, is excelling at an older age. Lionel Messi's still better, of course. But I think that, I don't know, usually, a guy regressing is rarely really sudden. We tend to see it the year before a little bit, like we did with Peyton Manning. He had that one real bad year, the last year of his career, but we saw it the tail end of the previous year. So I'm not seeing it with LeBron James yet. So until we start seeing him a little bit, I'm going to rely on LeBron James to win a couple rings, and I think he's going to get to 6. And gosh, I'm going to go ahead and say he'll find a way to get to 7 at some point. And I think he's going to three-peat. I think Lakers got 2 more in them in a row. But I will say one team to look out for, though, a big trade. The Houston Rockets and Washington Wizards. The Rockets trading Russell Westbrook to Washington in return for John Wall and a first-round pick. Who do you guys think won that trade? What do you think about that trade? Former All-Star in John Wall, who's barely played the last 2 years, again, and Russell Westbrook, who I have as the most overrated player in NBA history, but albeit a former MVP somehow.
I mean, to my mind, it's a wash of a trade. You have the fact that John Wall has not played in 2 years. I believe it's December 26 or something like that. 2018 was the last time that he appeared in an NBA game. He's had a couple of injuries since then, and part of the reason why Houston got the first-round draft pick out of it is because we don't know what he is. We know what Russell Westbrook is. Now, for how much longer he's going to be what he is, we don't know. They both rely on the same attributes, speed and athleticism. Neither of them are particularly strong shooters. So I think that for Washington, they're taking a gamble that with a healthy Russell Westbrook over a we don't know John Wall, and there's also some friction between John Wall and Bradley Beal. They're counting on getting Russell Westbrook and making a run for one of those last couple spots in the Eastern Conference playoffs to try to incentivize Bradley Beal to stick around for a little bit. For Houston, they saw an opportunity to acquire an asset, a protected first-round draft pick, but within a couple of years, that could actually end up being a really valuable asset. And then taking a shot on John Wall and seeing if he is, if he's still got something left in the tank. I kind of think of it as a wash. They both have awful contracts. I think I give a slight edge to the Wizards just because we know Russell Westbrook is healthy and can play at this point at a high level. We don't know when or if John Wall will return to that capacity.
Yeah, we'll also see how, the two stars on each team mesh. How will Bradley Beal mesh with Russell Westbrook, and then how will James Harden mesh with John Wall? So, and John Wall, yeah, he's got to get healthy. If he gets healthy and he's playing at a level that he was playing at before he got injured, watch out for the Rockets.
Yeah, so I kind of am on the same page as Tom. I think this trade is a virtual wash. I think it depends on how healthy John Wall is. I think if we're getting all-star John Wall, I think that you would have to give a slight edge to the Rockets. We just don't know if that's what we're getting. What I do like about the John Wall and James Harden, I see John Wall is more willing to coexist with him. He's kind of more – John Wall is kind of like a weird mix because in the NBA we have a lot of these scoring point guards and we have the passing point guards. He's probably somewhere in the middle between those two, and I think he meshes a little bit better with Harden. In fact, there were reports that Harden preferred to play with John Wall over Russell Westbrook. You guys know how much I love field goal percentage and turnovers and stuff, and Westbrook is the most inefficient player in the NBA, very low field goal percentage, historically, a lot of turnovers. But John Wall actually has a pretty low field goal percentage himself, not quite as low as Westbrook, but not far behind. So these are two guys who I think are a little bit overrated, and it's because neither of them are great shooters. You mentioned this, Tom. So how do you get a low field goal percentage? Well, they score by driving into the basket. Neither guy's a three-point shooter or a jump shooter. So I think both of these guys are a little bit overhyped. It just comes down to how healthy is John Wall and what they do with that pick. I will say this about Houston, though, in general, in the offseason. We don't know what's going to happen, but they did get DeMarcus Cousins. Obviously, he's had a ton of injuries, but this guy was an elite player in the NBA when healthy. He may not be healthy again, and Wall may not be healthy, but taking all free agency into consideration, both of those guys are worth the risk, especially Cousins. They're not paying him as much as Wall. And I know Wall has a horrible contract, but I think Westbrook's is even worse. Correct me if I'm wrong. They might have saved a little bit of money on that one. I'd have to look that up. Maybe you can since you're contract Castleman over there. But DeMarcus Cousins, if DeMarcus Cousins and John Wall are close to who they were, the Rockets all of a sudden could compete to play in the Western Conference Finals if they have Harden, Wall, and Cousins all playing at a high level with some solid role players still around them. Drew, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know. I don't have any more thoughts about it. I mean, it just happened, and again, it's all about the meshing, and, I don't know what the contracts are. We'll have Tom look that up.
Yeah, I'm looking that up right now. So John Wall is signed through the 22-23 season, where Russell Westbrook is signed through, the same season. So actually, in terms of the amount of money... Westbrook's
contract is more money. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's more money.
It looks like it's a little bit more, but that's kind of negligible at this point.
What is
like his contract, when he signed it, it was 5 years, $206 million. John Wall is 4 years, $171 million. But again, with that extra year, that's where you're getting a lot of that big value, especially because it balloons at the end of the contract. I mean, looking at the cap hits, they're both 41, 44, and $47 million over the next 3 years. So I think it's pretty much a chemistry play. It's a take a chance on a guy that is coming back from an injury so we can get a first-round draft pick, because they had to send some stuff out to swap Chris Paul's contract for Russell Westbrook's contract. I think what it might come down to for me that also helps shade it more towards Washington is with Westbrook, I don't really have Houston being that great of a team or that much of a threat. Now, granted, they weren't much before, but I think with all that uncertainty, I'll give the short-term lead to Washington. We'll see. I don't think... We'll see.
Boogie wants to cook.
But yeah, as far as contracts go, relatively negligible here on in.
Fair enough. Well, we will see what happens for sure. We've got locks of the week, though. So this last week was quite a recap. A lot of interesting things happened. We're going to save your scenario for last time. I'll start with mine and Drew's picks, because yours was dramatic, but ours was dramatic too. So first off, I had the Chiefs. So when I first prepared for this show, and I already placed the bet on this at the Chiefs -3, and it washed. But I went back and listened to the audio. I did go ahead and say take the Chiefs at -3.5 too, because by showtime it had gone up to -3.5. Chiefs only won by 3. So I'll go ahead and take a loss. I'll give myself a loss because I did say go ahead and take him at 3.5 also. So I lost that one by 0.5 point. Really interesting one, the Eagles game. I sent you guys this article. I took the line at Eagles, or rather Seahawks -5.5. They won by 6, but the closing line was actually 6.5. At the very end, most people had it at 5.5 or 6, so they got a win or a wash. But Philadelphia throws a Hail Mary late in the game, gets a touchdown. They're down 7 points. Or no, was it 8 points? Yeah, they were down 8 points. So you kick the extra point to make it 7 points. Everyone wins. But a better placed $500,000 at Seattle -6.5. The Eagles go for 2, get the 2-point conversion, lose by 6. This guy's out of $500,000. Poor guy. So that
wasn't you, was it, Cayman?
That was not me. I don't have $500,000 to throw around.
Would we be doing the show today if that had been you, Cayman?
I would probably be going off to take money. Now, the number one rule of betting is don't bet more than you can afford to lose.
Exactly.
I may have had a measly $10 bet on that game that I won because I had him at -5.5. And then I had a 1 and 2 week. I'm not even going to talk about the Raiders game. 1 and 2 week. So I'm
Did you have the Raiders?
Yes, I did.
Oh no.
I don't want to talk about it. I'm 9-8-1 on the season. Still in first place. 1 game over 500. More wins than losses. I'll take that. Drew's in second place. He's 7-9-2. So you're a 2 games? I guess you're kind of weird. You're 2 wins behind, but you've got the tie. Drew had a really bad beat in soccer, Tom. Really bad. A bad wash, rather. So he had under 2 goals in the Newcastle United Crystal Palace game.
I remember.
0-0, 88th minute. 0-0. Goal in the 88th, goal in the 89th. 2 goals scored. He washes out. He washes that game, and then he won another one and lost another one. Let me pull it up here. You probably remember your picks, Drew, don't you?
Not off the top of my head here, unfortunately.
All right, here, let me pull up. I thought I wrote it down in there, but I guess I have it on my
your recap with you.
I have the recap. I must not. Sometimes I put it in my phone and I forget to move it to the computer. So the recap: Drew had a Vikings -4 over Panthers. You missed that one. Vikings won by 1, and you had Jaguars +7 against the Browns.
Oh yeah,
you did hit that one. So you were 1-1-1. You are 7-9-2 on the season. I'm 9-8-1. Tom Castleman had a brutal week. He missed the Lions +3 against Houston. Missed that badly. Cardinals -2.5 against the Pats. You might have won that had they made the field goal late in the game, but they missed the kick. Then the Patriots go back the other way and win. And then the really bad, you had Pittsburgh -5.5 over the Ravens. They won by 5, but they missed an extra point. And the Ravens also got a late 70-yard touchdown in that game, 19-14 final. Tom Castleman now 0-3 for this week. He is 4-14 on the season in last place. I will say this, to Tom's credit, he's still number 2 in our NFL Pigskin Pick'em group, where we pick straight up. I'm in first, second, Drew's in last. But Tom clearly does not have the luck when it comes to the lines, and he promised us if he goes 0-3, he's going to take himself and pick the opposite of what he would have.
Yes.
So, Tom, what do you have for us?
So I am sticking with the NFL because that is the only thing that gives me a shred of confidence, which means I shouldn't, but I'm going to. So these are to just quickly go over the methodology. I looked at the lines, and I am picking ones that I genuinely think will happen. And what we're going to do is I'm going to George Costanza myself, as Drew eloquently put it last week. We're going to record the opposite of what I'm saying should happen, because that seems to be the only thing that's going to work for me. So, to start off, give me the Chargers to cover +1 on the Patriots. All these numbers are off Bovada just to source that. I checked them earlier today. Chargers to cover +1 on the Patriots. I'll take the Raiders to cover 8 points over the Jets, and I will have the Colts covering -3.5 against the Texans. So those are my locks of the week.
So do you want the opposite of all those?
And we are now going to fade it, yes.
Okay, so you're going to take all the opposite of what you said.
So you're then you're taking the Patriots to cover against the Chargers. You're taking the Jets to cover against the Raiders. And what was the third one?
The Texans will now beat the Colts, or they'll cover -3.5 against the Colts. And to further prove that I am doing this fair and equitably, on that NFL Pick'em comment that you mentioned, I do have the Chargers beating the Patriots. So I do think that they will win that game, despite the fact that the Patriots are favored. But for the purposes of this segment, I am fading myself for the week, and we're going to see what happens. If I go 0-3 on fading myself, then we know that I'm really in big trouble.
Wow.
Right. Well, I will go ahead and tell you, since you brought this game up, I'm going the opposite way in this game. Patriots and Chargers. So I believe you're quoting a -1 line. I've got it at even still. What I saw, it may be -1 now. These things move at every hour. But I will take the Patriots straight up over the Chargers, who are 3-8. New England is 5-6. Still clinging to some playoff hope, a must-win. And I'll tell you, part of the reason why I'm taking this game is I've consistently bet against the Chargers this year, and they've been my lucky team. You know, you guys remember this. I had the Dolphins over the Chargers. Last week I had the Bills, maybe not for our locks, but in a separate thing, I had the Bills covering against the Chargers. Needless to say, a lot of weeks I picked the Chargers not to cover, and I win. And actually their record is close to 500 against the spread, but it seems like every time I pick them not to cover, they don't, which is a smart play. Never bet on the Chargers as an organization. Those guys are consistent chokers and have been in recent memory, whereas the Patriots, while they're having a tough season, New England tends to win games like this, a must-win, a winning-type franchise. Definitely taking the Patriots over the Chargers in that one. So actually your fade pick will end up being right. For my second pick of the line, I would take the Bills -1.5 against the 49ers. This actually was supposed to be a home game from San Francisco, but they're playing it in Glendale, Arizona because of the whole COVID stuff. We didn't bring this up actually in our earlier chat, but their county is saying they can't play sporting events for at least the next 3 weeks. So ironically enough, the Bills already played in Arizona. They had that heartbreaking loss to the Cardinals on the Hail Mary. But simply Buffalo -1.5, that's barely, like they're almost a pick'em game. The Bills are 8-3, the 49ers are 5-6. San Francisco's offense is much worse. If San Francisco were healthy, they would win this game, but they're still banged up. Buffalo looks like a much stronger, much healthier team in that one. And my final line that I have is Packers -8.5 over the Eagles. The Eagles are an absolute mess. We talked about the Seattle not being able to stop the pass. Well, Philly had 215 pass yards against Seattle, and about a fourth of those came on the last drive. and one of them was a Hail Mary. So they were well under 200 yards, about 150 yards for most of the game. They can't really get anything going on their offense. Meanwhile, you had Aaron Rodgers, who is in an MVP hunt right now with Patrick Mahomes. They're competing for that MVP. He has the most touchdown passes in the NFL. We had 4 touchdown passes against a very good Bears defense. I know their offense is bad, but their defense is good and has played Rodgers well in recent years. 4 touchdown passes. He's absolutely rolling. The Packers' schedule sets up pretty nicely. They're going to want to get that 1 seed if they can, since they have that tiebreaker over the Saints. I think the Packers win big over the Eagles, minus 8.5.
Wow. Okay.
Drew, what do you got? You got some soccer over under in the EPL?
Yeah, so I got Drew locks of the week, of course. We go to the EPL, the English Premier League, on Saturday. Burnley against Everton, under 2.5. That give me that. And then for the NFL, what?
That might actually hit. Burnley doesn't score a lot.
No, they've been good for me so far this season on these locks of the week for the most part, unless they push. NFL Sunday though, Cardinals against the Rams in Arizona. Cardinals are +3. Give me the Cards in that game to cover that number against the Rams. And then finally, the Titans at home versus the Browns. 53.5 is the over-under. I'm taking the under in that contest.
Could happen. 2 very good running teams. We may have a slower-paced type game. Well, I kind of like your picks this week, Drew.
The ultimate compliment.
I'll probably go 0-3 now since Common likes them.
Well, I normally just like to disagree with you just because it's fun. But
I didn't pick the Ravens. I didn't pick the Chargers. I didn't pick the Texans. All the teams that you despise.
Yeah, you've been picking the Chargers this year incorrectly, by the way. I referenced getting right with the Chargers. You tend to be wrong with the Chargers. So
I'll probably pick them for Sunday. Who knows?
We'll see.
I'm not doing that as a lock, though. Of course
Okay.
not.
Fair enough. Yeah, picks can pick them. Maybe you can take the Chargers. We'll see.
Yes.
Well, that'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to it. So, Tom, real quickly. So the term is fade yourself? I thought it was
correct.
Fade. Why is it fade?
No. So, Drew, you might know a little bit better. I'm not huge into gambling, but I'm familiar with the term that if you like somebody's advice, you go with it. But if you think somebody's a blowhard, you think that they have bad information, or they're just what you do is you say, hey, they're picking this game. They think this is they think they have an advantage in putting money on this. I'm going to go ahead and do the opposite because that's how wrong I think they are. I think that's more or less the gist of it.
Can I have 2 side stories to that? One that you'll like, one that you won't like. So, do you remember the columnist, and he was on Around the Horn, Jay Mariotti?
Of course.
Yeah.
Years ago.
So, yeah, right. So, Jay Mariotti, this was the NBA Finals, Dallas Mavericks and Miami Heat. I think this was 05. This was actually...
Maybe 04. Was that the 04 one?
Might have been 04. This is Dwayne Wade and Shaquille O'Neal. This is not like the LeBron one.
That's 06.
06? Okay. So it was in that range. It was Dwayne Wade's first NBA title with Shaquille O'Neal. The Mavericks went up 2-0 in that series. And Jay Mariotti, I had noticed at least, and maybe I didn't have enough sample size, I don't know, but in the bit that I had watched the show, I noticed that he tended to be very wrong. Charles Barkley is that guy now, by the way, that tends to be very wrong with his picks. Anywho, Mariotti said that the series was over after the Mavericks went up 2-0, and I said, well, the Heat will win because Mariotti said it. Sure enough, the Heat went 4-0. So that's the one you'll like. Here's one that you won't like. So last week, I was eyeing a potential line, which was the Cardinals minus 2.5. I was considering betting on that game. And then I thought to myself, well, Tom Castleman put that game as his lock of the week. I'd better hold off. So I didn't bet the other way. I just didn't bet on it at all. So it was, I was inspired not to go with your pick.
That's absolutely what you should be doing. That's what fading is all about. That's what my picks this week are all about.
I love it. I love it. All right, statement of the week, salutes of the week. What do you guys got?
You want me to get mine out of the way?
Go ahead. Yours will be short and sweet.
Yeah, mine are short and sweet, just like me. So I'll get them out of the way. So my first, I have two salutes. I guess the second, the first one's definitely a salute. The second one, we'll call it a salute. But salutes to Sarah Fuller. She became the first female to play in a Power 5 football game. She was the kicker last week for Vanderbilt. Mizzou shut down the doors, but she was able to kick off the second half for the Commodores. So we'll see if Vanderbilt scores this week against Georgia. That was a great story to see, and
I would like to see her get a kick in, but I don't know if she will get another chance this week. Yikes.
Yeah, I mean the Commodores, they go up against a tough Georgia team, so yeah.
Derek Mason's gone as head coach. They haven't won a game. They're playing Georgia, who wants to win as big as possible, just in case they somehow make the playoff if everybody else loses. So yeah, they're in trouble. I don't know if she'll get a chance to kick. I hope she does, though, but I don't know that she will.
Yeah, it'd be really cool to see her attempt either a PAT or a field goal, because that's where it comes in for the kicker. I know the second half kickoff wasn't, a deep down to the end zone. It was a directional kick, and that's because she's a soccer player. That's how you kick. You'll notice that in the NFL, they have different kickers for the kickoff and the field goal. So that's why it was a directional kick. Some people are like, well, she can't kick it far. Well, that's not the case. That's actually how soccer players kick. Anyway.
Wow, you sound very educated on soccer there. You're Mr.
People were like, yeah, she can't kick far. It's like, yeah, she can, but
that wasn't the play. I'm a soccer player.
I know. I know. Yeah.
On the show, freshman B team leading goal scorer, also second-place soccer leading goal scorer, and I don't know whether she can kick or not, but I know for a fact they were trying to execute a shorter kick there. It wasn't like she messed up the kick.
Correct. Yeah, they were trying to do that. Absolutely. And but anyway, my second salute is we're just about ready for the start of the fantasy football playoffs. I know in the league we're in right now, it's been a tough season for me. I don't think I'm going to make the playoffs, but I have a few other leagues, and I'm on the fringe of playoff territory there. So on Sunday, make sure you have NFL Red Zone on. Enjoy the action. Be fortunate that we have football right now and cheer on your fantasy team. And, of course, Wednesday afternoon football, that was awesome. I was able to have that on in the background while doing some work, so that was really cool.
It was a low-scoring game, which you probably enjoyed.
I didn't enjoy watching the Ravens without Lamar Jackson. I mean, you have Robert Griffin III, and then you have Trace McSorley in there. I mean, those guys are not the quarterbacks that I.
By the way, if they didn't, mishandled the play at the end of the first half, they should have gotten at least a field goal there. And the clock ran out. The Steelers.
Yeah, that was a weird situation.
And then the guy dropped the touchdown. That was a whole mess for the Ravens there. If they get a touchdown or even a field goal there, who knows what happens?
Yeah, or if they have Lamar Jackson. I mean,
Sure.
This is a team that you knew that Robert Griffin III, he was really good at Baylor, but the NFL, the success has not been as good as he was in college, and so he's a what?
Minus the first year. He's one-hit wonder.
On the football team?
Yeah, he was Washington. He was very good as a rookie.
Okay, I couldn't remember, but yeah. So I guess he was good as a rookie, and I think he got hurt. I think that's kind of the reason.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But anyway, it was tough to watch the Ravens without Lamar Jackson out there against a very good Steelers team.
Yeah, I mean, Lamar's overrated anyways, but,
I was just trying to get you to say that.
They weren't going to win that game with Lamar or without Lamar. Pittsburgh didn't play their best game. It happens, but they pulled out the win. What's your statement? Do you have a statement? No, that's your statement. Just more of a
No,
salute.
those are my salutes and statement.
Tom, what do you got?
All right. So first, a quick programming note on the fantasy football front for the league that we are in. Both of you guys are still in playoff contention. The way that I have set up the league is that the last spot goes to the next highest point total. It's not necessarily record based for that last spot.
Yeah,
And
but
the
I
way
don't
that we
have any
have it-
points.
The way that I have it, hang on, is that we have 4 teams that have clinched, and then it's you, it's Drew, Common, Jake, and then this guy Luke, who I hope he's not dead, but he hasn't been playing, he hasn't been setting his lineup. He's on the verge. He's on the verge. If he loses this week, and he probably will, he has the fewest points in the league, and Jake has, I think, like the 3rd most. So Jake would vault up into the 5th position, which means the last spot comes down to you guys, and your point total's more than your record. So I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's like double-digit points separate you guys, or something like that.
No.
So,
It's like 12 points.
No,
Is it?
no.
I check.
It might be
I updated
14. I'm
today.
going to pull up the standings right now. I'm going to pull up the standings. So it
so
goes down to
don't-
me and Drew.
It's one of those things where like a couple different things have to happen. If this Luke guy, if his team loses, and I'm 99.9% sure that they will, and Jake wins, he gets that 5th spot, and then the 6th spot comes down to, among you two guys, who has the most total points for the season. So make sure you set your lineups. Don't fret, it's not over. This is why I set the league up the way that I
I'm
started.
up by like 21 on you, 22,
Yeah,
23.
22, I think, roughly. 22 something. So this reminds me of fantasy baseball. I was a 6th seed, got the last seed in fantasy baseball a couple years ago. Keep in mind, this was a money league with a lot of people, and I ended up getting 2nd place and won like $200 or something, and I was last place. So maybe this is foreshadowing. Sneak into the playoffs, make a
Anything
run.
can happen.
I don't know, Common. You have a lot of guys on bye, so
I have a lot of
looking.
No, I have guys on buys who aren't good. Actually, I have Rob Gronkowski on a buy who hasn't been good. I upgraded to Robert Tonyan, and I have who's the Leonard Fournette, who does nothing on buys. So I have guys I don't need on buys. I've actually barbecued myself multiple times this year, starting the wrong guys. So hopefully I make the right decision. It'll be really interesting. Who's your quarterback?
It'll be good.
Prescott early in the year. You don't have him anymore.
I think
Dak Prescott.
I had Kyler Murray and Josh Allen like the whole season, right?
Oh, okay. Who
Yeah,
had
Dak Prescott was on the guy who stopped playing. Dak Prescott is still the starting quarterback for this guy's team. So,
and how does he have a winning record? Because he has the least points in the league by far, and he still has a winning record.
Because he has
What
Kamara
happened
too.
Well,
So what happened was at the beginning of the season, he was steamrolling everybody. I think he started out like 5-0. Like he had an incredible record to start, and then like Dak Prescott got injured, and I think he just he stopped paying attention to the team. I don't know what is going on in his personal life. I mean, obviously, fantasy football for free is not really a time-intensive thing that a lot of people put their time into. So there's no value judgment on that. I think that he got off to a great start, and then it just fell off. So
he has a heck of a team. He has Adam Thielen, Cooper Kupp, Kamara, Aaron Jones, DK Metcalf, Devontae Parker. What?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying, though.
Yeah.
Tom, you mentioned that he hasn't been starting guys, but I remember a few weeks ago I looked at his team and his matchup, and he had like 3 guys on the bench who didn't play. He was like down 3 players and won anyways somehow.
I'm familiar with the game out of respect to the individual against whom he won that game. I'm not going to be discussing it. It wasn't me, no.
Oh.
It was not me.
Okay.
But getting to my statement of the week,
Sure.
with Anthony Davis inking his new deal with the Lakers and teams returning to their facilities for training camp, NBA free agency is unofficially over. Of course, players can still sign. It's been an exciting period of unsigned players changing teams and burgeoning young talent signing those lucrative maximum contracts. Which leads me to my statement of the week. The NBA should 100% do away with the max contract and any notion of it. It actually hurts the top-end performers in the game financially and makes it more difficult to build contending teams. We can, and eventually will later down the line, debate the morality of having salary caps at a later point, but to have a cap within the cap on how much you can spend on a particular player is ludicrous to me. The NFL doesn't do that, despite quarterbacks being the single most outsized cap hit on many teams' books. The value of LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Stephen Curry, the value that they bring to an individual franchise is so much greater than the maximum salary allows for. They should be compensated much, much more. The max contract was put into place to help incentivize players to stay with the team that drafted them by offering more money, more security in terms of number of years the contract could be. What this has turned into is teams trading players away before they reach max level out of fear of overpaying, because now top players on a team expect a max contract and nothing short of that. I lost my place. I need a teleprompter. It also leads to a lot of acrimonious divorces where players take a max deal, becomes unhappy with the team being unable to compete, and then forces their way out of town. This hurts the franchise's ability to acquire the best value, especially when these players say that they will only go to a specific list of teams, and it further disrupts the competitive balance in the league. The whole point of salary caps and caps within caps is to protect owners from having to put their money where their mouth is when it comes to being honest with their fan bases and what's really important. It also shifts the onus to players to manage the public relations in cases of separation or poor performance. So the max salary in the NBA should be done, period.
Real quick.
So the Supermax, is that what you're talking about?
The max, the Supermax, there should be no cap on how much a team can spend with a player. If a team has a salary cap of $100 million and they want to give $80 million of it to LeBron James, they absolutely should be able to do so.
Real quick, so this sounds very much like Contract Castleman. That's what I call you. He loves the contracts and all of that stuff.
I love the team building aspect of sports and the puzzle of putting together a competitive team. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you'd be more well equipped to put together the Bears instead of Ryan Pace. But then again, so would I think.
I'd take that job. A lot of people.
Peyton Manning got rumored for that job, by the way. I don't know if you heard that. That's an interesting rumor. And Louis Riddick, who's probably more qualified, would be the guy that I would want. Louis or Louis Riddick. Is it Louis? I think it might be Louis. Who knows?
Louis Riddick, yeah.
Louis Riddick, the ESPN guy. He's very, very sharp, dresses sharp.
Mm-hmm.
So real quick, and again, I'm just hypothesizing here, and this may be completely wrong, but I would argue that maybe part of the reason why NBA doesn't have salary cap is because, 2 or 3 guys could dominate even more. If, say, the team has more money, they can kind of stack their team even more than other sports, because obviously every sport is a team game, but in football, you've got 22 guys out there at once. Same for soccer. Baseball, I think it's like 18 guys at once. So, or whatever, 9, then 9 on the other side. I guess 9 guys at once on your team. So basketball is lesser guys on the court. So if you really kind of monopolize your team, it may be even a bigger advantage if they do the cap. But I can also kind of see your point at the same time. So I don't know. It's complicated.
Mm-hmm.
I will think more on it and let you know what I think off air.
For sure.
As far as my statement of the week, mine is a statement and also a hope. It's kind of a hopeful statement.
Okay,
So,
a hope. Okay.
The College Playoff Committee continues to devalue BYU, and it is because of strength of schedule. I know that's why they're doing it. But BYU is 9-0. They're demolishing teams. They haven't played that many good teams, but when they have, they've smoked them. They won 51-17 at Boise State. Boise State is 4-1, so their only loss was to BYU. That's a very good Boise State team. Beat them by 34 on the road. Some of these teams are down this year, but again, 55-3 on the road against Navy. Houston was 43-26. So they're handedly beating teams, and I want the committee to rank them higher than 13. I think they should be right in that 7-8 range. But they are getting a little bit of an opportunity. Coastal Carolina game, they're going to play Coastal Carolina now. That game was canceled because of COVID. Coastal was supposed to play Marshall, who also is undefeated and no one has talked about. Is that right? Was it Coastal and Marshall, or who did they cancel?
Liberty.
Coastal and Liberty.
Coastal and Liberty. Liberty has one loss. So another really good team. They canceled Coastal and Liberty. BYU will now play Coastal. I hope BYU beats them by 4 touchdowns, and they show the committee wrong. They say, we can't beat a good team. Well, we're going to go on the road and beat an undefeated team out of the Fun Belt, the Sun Belt. I used to cover the Sun Belt. My first job out of college.
Did you?
They call it the Fun Belt. That was before Coastal Carolina was not in the league at the time. The league actually, App State and Louisiana Lafayette are pretty good. So Coastal has beaten some good teams. I think BYU wins that game big and hopefully gets in the top 10, hopefully 7 or 8, and they get the respect they deserve. Well, I think
Sounds great.
Sounds great. I think that just about does it for Salute Your Sports. Week 8, we're going to be back next week. Plenty more to talk about, and emphasis on greatly, looking forward to seeing what happens with Tom Castleman's locks of the week.
Yes, and we don't want to get confused, but yes.
Yes. Cannot wait. See you guys.